Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Positively Trek. I'm one of your hosts, Dan Gunther, and with me, of course, a little more remotely than usual this time, is my wonderful co-host, Barry DeFord. Barry, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good. I am in a cabin in the woods right now, way off in the reaches of Alberta, looking at a very snowy landscape. Actually, we got hit pretty hard out in this neck of the woods, so that's always fun.
Wow. I've seen pictures down Highway 40 from where I live where it's getting pretty snowy, but we haven't gotten it here yet, other than the few errant flakes coming down that are, you know, portents of things to come, I guess.
Yeah, well, it seems like the middle of the country / continent is getting a heat wave, and we're getting the cold side of that. So yeah, I would say we received what I would consider a skiff of snow.
Yeah.
So nothing too bad.
Yeah, nothing that's going to stick around. It is, of course, we are recording this on Thanksgiving Day here in Canada, which for our American listeners, it's about a month ahead of where you guys celebrate Thanksgiving. So, yeah, a little early for, but snow in October is not unheard of for sure around here, but usually doesn't stick around quite yet.
Yeah, snow in August sometimes happens. So yeah.
This is true.
Yeah.
Northern Alberta, folks.
Yeah, actually, I did actually experience snow in July once, but I was up in the mountains. I was on the Brazos Loop, and we were way up, and it had been unseasonably cold and rainy. And yeah, we got, I mean, it wasn't like snow, but there was definitely snow kind of floating around, a couple flakes and stuff, and thinking it was like the middle of July. I was like, what? But it happens.
Well, we definitely experienced some environmental swings in this part of the world, but nothing like what Khan and his folks are experiencing on Ceti Alpha V in the episodes we're going to be talking about today. So, we are talking about Star Trek Khan episodes 5 and 6. So episode 5 is Imagination's Limits, which we'll start off with. And this is where it happens. This is where Ceti Alpha VI explodes. I wasn't expecting that, but I guess it makes sense. We're halfway through the series basically with this episode, so it makes sense. That's kind of, we get the before and the after, I guess, starting with this episode. Yeah,
they don't really get much of a chance to like bask in anything good. Hey, it's they're dealing with the environmental issues of Ceti Alpha V, fighting evil, brain slugs and all that sort of stuff. And then, I don't know, there's really not a lot of like, okay, cool, we're going to have like a month of just solid, nice stuff. No, we're going straight into, now we're in trouble. Thank goodness Paolo was able to spot that though, hey?
Yeah, so Paolo is an interesting character, and we're going to talk about him for sure, because I think there's some interesting allegories that we can explore with his character and what's going on there. I guess we should start at the beginning of this episode, which sees the return of George Takei as Captain Sulu. We haven't had him since the first episode, so it's very welcome to have another little bit of Sulu here. We know from previous episode that Lear has been wanting access to the sensor logs of the Ceti Alpha system that the Enterprise did when it first dropped off Khan and his people there. And Sulu has those for her, but kind of wants to assess her state of mind and how she's like, her biases and that kind of thing before he just hands them over, which gives us this really interesting conversation between the two of them. Yeah. And I like the kind of questioning of where Lear is coming from, because I think we haven't heard everything yet as to why she's so interested in maybe not a redemption of Khan, but a greater understanding of Khan. She gives some good reasons here, but I still think there's more to it than that.
Yeah. I think what we're kind of getting here is that question gets opened, and I think it receives its kind of next beat at the end of episode 6, and we can talk about that because I think that revelation kind of opens the door as to perhaps where she's coming from. But I would want to kind of kick this off a little bit by reading into Sulu a little bit, who in a lot of ways I think is also showing a limit of imagination, right? I mean,
absolutely.
he's so set in his ways, and I mean, Kirk's a friend, someone who he respects greatly, all this sort of stuff. And I think that's why he would be so predetermined to come to his defense, which I also note the irony where I know George Takei has been somewhat critical of Bill Shatner in the past. So I do find it neat that, in this universe, we've got a slightly different outlook. So no, I appreciate where he's coming from, and I understand. And I think in a lot of cases, it's sort of where we're at right now in certain cases on how we look at history, how we look at historical figures. I mean, for people in the United States, this is technically Columbus Day. And the more you learn about Christopher Columbus, the more you realize he was a complete monster, like a complete monster who did awful and terrible genocidal things.
And even in the standards of the time, like that's not even just a post, fact, thing. Yeah. At the time, he was considered a monster.
Yeah, Bartolomé de las Casas was like, this guy's a complete and total psychopath, and we need to stop him. Who was the monk who kind of tailed Columbus through this. And I think, that's where, again, people who defend Columbus for Columbus's sake and don't know the history, that really it came around from Italian people not wanting to be persecuted in the United States, and they needed some kind of historical figure to latch onto. But again, now that historical figure that they did latch onto to become more, I guess you could say, assimilated or absorbed into the body politic of the United States, they need to shed that now. And I think there are some who lack the imagination to be able to fully comprehend that this quote unquote hero is actually not a hero at all. And so we can kind of reverse this maybe with Khan to some degree. And I think the story we're being told in real time as we go back into the quote unquote history of it, we can see Khan as a much more complicated character. But again, we see where his imagination has its limits too, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah. So going back to this scene, though, that I do want to talk about, I do love that these sensor readings that Sulu does eventually give her, she's kind of questioning, like, I don't understand how, they must have missed something. Who took these sensor readings? It's like, oh, that was the science officer, Commander Spock. And she's like, oh, dang. oh, the Spock. Okay, well, somebody missed something.
Yeah. In this case, they should call them sensor. But
sensor readings. Sorry. Yeah, yes,
sensor readings. Yeah. I like how she comes in and she is sort of challenging. Like I feel like she's on Mount Olympus, kind of challenging the gods a little bit. A little bit of a Perseus kind of complex.
Yeah, and this is something we see in Star Trek a lot, but usually from the perspective of, Captain Kirk or Captain Picard, who has either the admiral or the ambassador or the civilian scientist come aboard who's all, But I like that we're getting a little bit more from the scientist's perspective in this one. She's got a tough row to hoe as a character, coming up against our heroes, right? But
yeah.
I do wonder, I still suspect there's something more sinister about Ceti Alpha VI itself than we've been led to believe, because we've had several people now say, like, oh yeah, it looks like the core is unstable, but it will be something that would happen, millennia or millions of years after. Like, we've had both, Spock apparently probably say this when he took the scans initially. And we also had Paulo say almost exactly the same thing in like the first or second episode when they first detected that. So I would tend to back up Spock's sensor readings. Like, even Paulo took readings and said, yeah, this looks like it's going to be a problem, but like in a few million years, like on geological timescales, not anything that's going to blow up in, 4 episodes from now. Whoops.
Yeah, slight miscalculation.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm thinking there's something more there for sure. But we do get an interesting discussion about, I like Lear's quote here where she says, in my experience, monsters are made, not born. I'd like to better understand the recipe. So, yeah, I get that as an impetus for doing this research, but I still feel like there's something more there.
Yeah, and I mean, I might push back a little bit. I think it is true that monsters are more made than born, but I also think that those ingredients do come baked in with a lot of our historical monsters of the past. Like you can sort of see how they get to their point. I think the main ingredient, the main thing that can really make the monster is the opportunity in a lot of cases. You know, I think
Yeah.
a lot of our monsters in the 20th century would have been just kind of jerks in their little life systems rather than horrible monsters overall. It's just they were given the opportunity to be more monstrous in that respect. So yeah,
One might say enabled as well by
there you go.
not just even given the opportunity, but like encouraged and enabled by the people around them.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think this is where a lot of the kind of ripped from the headlines moralizing, I guess, to some degree, that Star Trek is good at doing. I think this is where the discussion is kind of lacing itself into this little chat that Sulu and Lear have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, let's get to Ceti Alpha V and the main thrust of the story, where, as we mentioned, basically starts with Ceti Alpha VI blowing up, and Paolo witnessing this in his telescope and showing Khan. And shout out to the voice acting and the sound design in all of this, because when Khan looks through the telescope and you just hear, no, like the sheer unbelievability of what he is seeing, like that is so conveyed in, like I said, the sound design, but also the acting of Naveen Andrews and the other cast members. Very well done. Like I was standing there with them watching this happen.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of taken by the science of this moment too, and the consideration that they put in, because the loss of a planet like that would actually affect the orbit as well, which I know we already knew that, but it's explained out in a very easy to understand way, with that same level of, and pun intended, gravitas, into kind of this crisis now that they see themselves. And also, it's not like immediately this debris is going to hit the planet, right? Paolo's giving us calculations and stuff like that as to what's going to happen. But also, I forget now if it was the ship, or because it's been a week since I've listened to this episode. But I forget if it was the ship or if it was bits of debris coming down. But that popping and booming noises that were being made really reminds me of the Chelyabinsk impact that happened about 10 or some years ago. Very similar kind of popping and booming noises that again just led credence to the realism that these sound engineers are putting in. So again, kudos to the sound engineers. You guys need an award or something.
Yeah. So that bit is a ship crashing down.
Yes.
There's no debris yet. They make a point of saying it would be, months before debris kind of starts raining down on them. The two biggest pieces of debris that are cited, Paolo says, are about the size of Iran. So yeah, and they will strike Ceti Alpha V, he says. And Khan asks where, and Paolo says it does not matter. Doesn't matter where.
Goodness. You think like the Chicxulub crater that hit 65 million years ago was about the size of New York City.
Yeah.
And it obliterated pretty much virtually all life on Earth, right? Something the size of Iran would literally turn the surface of Ceti Alpha V molten.
Yes.
Like, good heavens. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
So, this object does crash down to the ground, though, and it turns out to be a vessel. It's a starship of some sort that has crashed on the planet. They're, of course, going to go scout out the crash site to see if there are any survivors and what to do about them if there are survivors, which leads to an interesting debate between basically Khan and Ivan and everyone else, and Marla, who is kind of the voice of reason, I would say, kind of laying out a lot of ideas, like if they're warp capable, they may be able to help them survive this apocalypse, giving all these reasons why they should kind of have an open mind. But this is where we see where maybe, I'm struggling to find the exact words, but maybe the genetic programming that these folks have in them is kind of kicking in. The other, right? They don't know anything about them. They have no idea of any intention or whatsoever, but immediately it goes to, we must assert our dominance over this place and eliminate any outsiders or competition or anything like that. And it was interesting that, like, that to me feels like, oh, that's the genetic programming that was put into them that gives them that response, right?
Yeah, I have to say, like, it may be a bit of a jarring shift for me, seeing how, we've been getting this one kind of look at Khan specifically, and then seeing him immediately be like, oh, there's others here. Okay, we need to exterminate them immediately, right? And I mean, I think your explanation has kind of assuaged some of my frustration I've had with this episode. Was I did find that his sudden shift, especially if he's a tactician, if he thinks tactically, all of these sorts of things, for him to immediately resort to sudden and extreme violence against a group who he has no context for, does kind of ring a little like, really? Like, it did sort of suspend my disbelief. It didn't suspend my disbelief. It reduced my suspension of disbelief in a way where I was thinking maybe something a little more like, let's get to know these guys and then we can infiltrate and destroy them, rather than get your automatics and your pitchforks and we're just going to go, shank them up real quick kind of thing. It was a little bit jarring for me, that shift, but I appreciate the tension that it also creates.
Yeah. That said, like, what we've seen of Khan in this series has just been him and his people, right? And the people that he's protecting. Every time, even prior to this, that we've seen Khan encounter a group that is, even the slightest bit opposed to his plans or just an outsider, right? Like in Space Seed, he immediately went to taking over the Enterprise, even though all the people on board, there was never a mention of like, we're going to put you in chains for what you've done or anything like that. Like, they hosted him to dinner and talked about their philosophies, and then he tried to take over the ship and kill Captain Kirk. So, it's not that far outside his modus operandi, I guess.
No, and I think this is, again, lending that. I think you're saying, like, this is basically what he was programmed to do, and he is sort of following his program. And I mean, if there's often the saying of, like, if you give a person a hammer, they're going to solve their problems with that hammer.
Everything looks like a nail.
Yeah, exactly. So in that respect, no, that does sort of make sense. But boy, their insistence on sudden and brutal violence is definitely that you and I have felt very sympathetic to Khan, and I think that sympathy definitely gets knocked down a couple of pegs by their immediate response.
Yeah, I feel like this episode was kind of almost the writers, like the last few episodes have been them filling up a tall glass of water, just kind of having it in the background and us not noticing it. And then this episode is splash right in your face. Hey, remember who these guys are? Oh, yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, exactly. What do you think of, like, and also that there's a hubris to them too, where they're like, oh, there's like a couple hundred, a couple are dead, a bunch are dead, but like most of them are still alive. And like, okay, well, there's 41 of us. Let's go kill them all. And it's like, so each of you are going to take 10 down. Hey, that's, wow.
Well, they're genetically engineered supermen, right? They're, yeah. Oof. Yeah. Yeah, ours is the superior, right? Is kind of the rallying cry that Khan gives, and something that it's echoes of when Joachim dies in Wrath of Khan, right? Right before he dies, he reaches towards Khan and says, "Yours is the superior," and then he dies. So
yes,
this is the rallying cry they will fall on their swords by at some point as well, right? So Paulo, I want to talk a little bit at this point, because this is where he's kind of a little bit incredulous that Khan and the rest of his followers are all going to go kill these aliens, right? He's kind of doing the science, and he's saying, like, there's a cataclysm coming. That should be our priority. We should not be killing these aliens. Maybe they can help us. I am like immediately thinking of, gestures broadly at the world around us, right? Like the climate crisis is the biggest existential threat humanity has faced in, any kind of modern times that you can think of, right? Maybe, I mean, there's arguments to be made for other things, but this is one that's going to affect the entire planet, and we can't stop, worrying about our petty little whatevers. We can't come together and face this, right? And I feel that frustration that I feel looking at that coming through in Paulo here, who's seeing everybody arming for war and getting their swords and maces ready, and he's like, guys, it's not going to matter in a couple months. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. We'll be fighting over a molten heap in no time. So what's the deal? And I agree, like there are parts of the world that are going to become quite uninhabitable. And you think about the billionaire class, I remember, I think it was Peter Thiel, when they said, do humans deserve to, kind of persist? And he was like, and then the interviewer's like, you're hesitating. And I think it's because, they are aware too. It's just they've got a plan, and I don't think we do. And I think we are getting whipped up by these petty differences. You see it on social media all the time, and I don't want to rail against that. But I think, we all have a little inner Paulo in us of gesturing kind of broadly at all of these things and being like, is any of this going to matter in 15 years? Because I really don't think it will, for us. I mean, maybe even less, but again, the moralizing there, I really do appreciate, because, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a better time. It could also be a freight train if we're not careful. And so we better start really thinking about it and acting upon it in a way that is kind of win-win, because he's right. There are things this species could do. So I've enjoyed Paulo, his development as a character so far as well. He seems very personable. There's a kind of like a childish uncertainty, but also a sense of wonder to him. He has the spirit of an inventor, and actually, in a few of the other episodes, you can hear people shouting his name once or twice. That I wanted to bring up in the last time we spoke, but I really appreciated, again, the detail that the sound artists are going into. But I think by shouting his name, it's one of those, you didn't notice it, but your brain did. I think we are really meant to kind of cleave to Paulo a lot as a character. And unfortunately, I do think that, considering this story is a tragedy, his story will be one of the biggest.
Yeah, I get that feeling as well. And even on the small scale here, like, he goes to Khan to try to appeal to him and says, we shouldn't be doing this. They can help us. They'll have technology. They'll have mapped the planet. We can use that. And Khan says, oh, you've given me a lot to think about. And Paulo says, awesome. So you're not going to go kill them. And you say, oh no, we're still going to do that. We're just going to capture a few of them and make them show us how to use their technology. Oh, okay, cool. Khan's lieutenant, you're done here. Get out. It's like, oh man. Talk about allegory for, the way scientists and science are used by the ruling class, right? Like,
totally.
Anyway. So the attack goes ahead. Khan plans this attack using squads of 3, 1 automatic weapon each, and swords and maces for everyone else. I again, with the number of people there, it's like, boy, yeah, the hubris of this is pretty intense. But I do like this conversation between Marla and Khan, where Marla is kind of imploring him not to go. And Khan, the typical, action hero guy, is like, oh, you don't need to worry about me. I'm strong. I'll survive. Don't worry about me. And Marla's like, dude, I'm not worried about you. I'm saying that you have a lack of imagination, and this is not what you need to be doing right now. I loved that scene. I thought Ren Schmidt as Marla, I just love her.
Marla, I think, spent a lot of time finding herself in Khan's society, and I think that's good. But I think this again sort of shows where maybe an unresolvable difference is going to exist for her moving forward. And obviously in Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, he mourns the loss of his wife and stuff like that. And now I'm starting to think more of there might be some guilt in that mourning the loss of his wife. And I think where that guilt's going to get transferred over to is to Kirk. But we can again see that Khan is going to be, to a degree, the architect of his own destruction because of the way he handles things. And I mean, this is where we can also talk a bit about Ivan, and he's going to come up more. But the relish that he has in getting into this down and dirty fight, I find him to be a revolting character in so many ways, just absolutely revolting. And he proves he just gets under my skin the more he says words and does things from this point onward.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this attack begins, but one of the suppositions that Marla put forward turns out to be true. The aliens who they've not observed speaking or anything like that turn out to be telepathic, and they're able to easily thwart this attack by apparently melting and breaking the weapons with the power of their minds, which at first dance. Which at first, when I was listening to this, I was wondering if that was actually happening or if that was in their minds. But in the next episode, I think it's pretty clear that no, they were actually just physically mentally breaking those weapons and melting them in front of them. So quite powerful, these aliens who come from the planet Elboria, which I thought was Eloria at first. I was like, Guinance people, but not just similar sounding. But one of them, who calls himself Delmonda, communicates with Khan directly in his mind, and this was really fascinating, this dialogue between the two of them, as Khan realizes kind of the futility of what they were trying to do, and Delmonda is confronted with this being who seems to want to kill them, but, has no trust of them whatsoever. And he says, okay, well, here, this will make you trust us. Here's an underground source of water where you can live and wait out the coming cataclysm, right? So, interesting. What are your thoughts on all of this?
So for whatever reason, my picturing of them is the season 8 Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns is thought to be an alien. I bring you peace. They just, for whatever reason, that's the picture in my head of what they look like. And I like this idea of there's sort of a lack of comprehension on both sides, right? Khan can't understand anything other than just violence and conflict and winning through might. And Delmonda is having trouble being like, well, like, don't we, why are you attacking me? This doesn't make any sense, right? Like, why are you attacking us? There's no reason to, there's no point, right? And I think his sort of omnipotence or semi-omnipotence of being able to find this water source, and we'll see kind of more later, but the fact that he can kind of turn their swords to plowshares and all these sorts of things, again, shows just how, our comprehension does have a lot to do with our cultural upbringing. Monsters are made, this kind of question. I think also really good people are made too. Delmonda, his initial interaction with Khan, I found quite fascinating in this episode, especially. The sound effects, again, were really good. His sort of broken communication was also pretty fascinating as well. And what he was able to kind of do with Khan's mind, I really like how much it perturbed Khan, because it did sort of show that in certain spaces, he isn't strong. He's actually a weakling. And I like how it perturbed him. So it did sort of satisfy me there.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, him kind of being shaken from his complacency, I guess, that he is the ours is the superior, right? No, not so much. But
yeah, Mike Tyson always says everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and I feel like Khan got a real good punch in the face, and I liked it.
Exactly, yeah. So the ending of the episode is Khan recording directly into these logs, talking about the hope that fell from the sky. But that he doesn't understand, though, why he's being helped. He says, God's help me. How can I help but fear that which I simply do not understand? So there's going to be still that wedge there where there's a disconnect. He just doesn't get why these people would be helping him.
Well, again, if we were to kind of philosophize into our own society, I do just think that in certain cases there are people who cannot fathom anything other than the way it is, and anything other than the way things are going. And I think that's why they look for scapegoats, they victimize, they kind of create their own little echo chamber of reality where they can reinforce themselves. And the truth hurts, I think, in a lot of cases. And I think that's why I like how Khan is so perturbed by this, because he knows there's something that would need to change within him to accept this help. And he does not know, nor does he have the equipment to process that in a meaningful, understandable way. And it's nice to see that he's at least capable of acknowledging that at this point, which again shows that he can change, shows that he actually has that humanity within him. But of course, we know this is a tragedy, so that's not going to happen.
Well, there's a lot of interesting stuff to come out of this episode. I think I never really even considered the possibility of other visitors to Ceti Alpha V, that there would have been contact with others. So it's really fascinating to see that kind of dynamic play out. And Alex Perry of the Weekly Trek podcast, I think it was him, was talking a bit about how he had no real interest in this show until it came out, and he realized, oh, wow, this is really good and I'm really enjoying it. And he had said the only way he thought at the beginning that, like, before it came out, that it would be interesting is if it told an Obi-Wan Kenobi type story where, you think they've been exiled this whole time, but there's actually some weird adventure where Khan left and did a bunch of stuff and then came back. And he said, I don't want that to be the case. But this is kind of a reverse way of doing that, which is something that I hadn't even considered, and which is why I'm not a writer.
Yeah. Honestly, I wasn't totally impressed with this arrival. I was thinking this was going to be just sort of a straight up survival story. Against all odds, they survive until Kirk comes back. So the addition of this sort of, I wouldn't know, would we call this a subplot? I feel like this is going to be a main plot, but I think in some way, all of the challenges that they were facing, like why, when they're hiding in the bushes, like where are the Ceti eels? Why aren't they having a problem with that? Are they going to start attacking, the Alborians and stuff like that? Like, is there going to be anything extra in the coming months before the cataclysm begins? So I feel like there was a bit of a an additional shift that wasn't absolutely necessary in the way I had pictured this. But you're right, I'm not a writer either. So, I'll take the twist. And I think, the next episode again does a pretty good job of sort of establishing this second side of the story. And it is true, as Paolo says, like everything on this planet won't matter in a couple of months anyway. So with the exception, I guess, of the Ceti eel itself, because it is the only creature to survive. And, well, it spends its time underground. So here we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good note to segue into episode 6, which we'll get to after a brief break. As always, Positively Trek is brought to you by its Patreon supporters, including Joyce Mirren, Brandy Jacala, Christina DeClercq-Zalagi, John Guppy, Out of Memory, Patrick Carlin, and Ricky Long. If you'd like to support the podcast, visit patreon.com/positivelytrek. You can join at any level and enjoy early access to episodes, ad-free episodes, episode shoutouts, executive producer credits, and more. Again, that's patreon.com/positivelytrek. Thank you so much to those of you supporting us. We truly do appreciate it. And now, back to the show. So, episode 6, The Good of All. Now, we are recording this on Monday the 13th, so this one we've just listened to before sitting down to record this, so pretty fresh in our minds, which I think will lend itself to an interesting conversation. I guess, first of all, we start out back on the Excelsior, and we find out that that Sulu has ordered Tuvok to keep an eye on Lear, to track her comings and goings, and to make note of what she's doing in the computer and her logs and that sort of thing. Again, I think kind of feeds into something you said about the last episode, is a little bit of lack of imagination on Sulu's part. He sees someone that as maybe an advocate for something he fears and can't control, and therefore seeks to establish his own control over that aspect of it himself, which is kind of a hair trigger, typically human response to things, which is interesting. It's what we're seeing in Khan with what he's programmed to respond, and we're seeing it also in Sulu in how he, kind of jumps to things and wants to respond to. So interesting parallels there.
Well, aren't Starfleet officers also technically programmed?
Absolutely. Right? We all are. All human beings are.
Yeah. So I think again, we've got a very neat, deeper philosophical question here of, are you aware of your own programming? And I think that's what I liked about how Khan was perturbed by Del Monde, I believe is how you say his name.
Del Monde.
Del Monde, thank you. I keep thinking Del Monte whenever so, me too. Anyway, yeah, I think of Del Monde and how Khan is now sort of, I guess, maybe obliquely aware of his own programming, because he knows this is the thing that's happening, but it's like trying to explain to a person a color they can't see, right? Like, have you ever, like, everyone just think in your head, and this actually happened to me in high school, explain a color to a person who's been blind since birth. Right? It's impossible. And it is actually perturbing to be able to try and explain that. So I think this also is quite indicative of, where Sulu is coming from. I don't think he's acting outside of what his quote unquote programming is. I just find it interesting how Lear kind of sees through that pretty fast, doesn't she?
Absolutely. And also, Tuvok really fascinates me in this as well, because he's been working closely with her, and he has a problem with kind of being ordered to do this, but does his duty because he's a Starfleet officer. But as you say, Lear sees through it right away and confronts Tuvok and she says, I'm going to go talk to Captain Sulu about this. And Tuvok's like, no, don't. That will make absolutely no difference. And and ends up kind of being on her side a little bit, if you can put it in that black and white stark terms. Like, he definitely sees the value in what she's doing, and sees a little bit of the illogic in Sulu's reaction to it.
Yeah, well, even Tuvok, the language used in the exchange between Tuvok and Sulu is very interesting, and Sulu picks up on it, right? You feel, he says, that's interesting. That's not very Vulcan of you. And again, I'm like, yeah, well, he's going to be, he'll be leaving Starfleet, right? And I think over some severe differences. So no, I really liked that little just dash of dash of emotion that Tuvok brings forward. And for Sulu, obviously having spent so much time on a bridge with a Vulcan, he's quick to pick up on that. He's quite canny and understands that. Even though I think he's showing a lack of imagination, Sulu knows his crew. And I really like that little piece there.
Yeah. Well, and I remember in the first episode when we talked about it, I mentioned the whole Tuvok leaving Starfleet thing. And then I kind of offhandedly said, but they probably won't really, like, that won't be part of this story, really. Like, it's just blah, blah, blah. I neglected to take into account the fact that Kirsten Beyer is one of the writers on this show. And that woman has lived and breathed Star Trek Voyager. She knows those characters inside and out. And if she's writing Tuvok, she knows everything about that character. And I guarantee, I almost completely flip what I said in episode 1. I guarantee that's at least going to be touched on. If we don't find out the reason for him doing it, it's at least going to be clear that this contributed to it, I think. So
has to have.
Absolutely. That is me not giving credit where credit is due to someone who is an incredible writer. And I just momentarily forgot how enmeshed in Voyager she is and how well she knows those characters. So
definitely.
But so that's kind of going on the Excelsior. Some interesting politics there. We'll come back to the Excelsior at the very end because there's a revelation right at the end that is going to be something that really changes a lot of how we're, I think, going to be viewing what exactly is going on here. But back on Ceti Alpha V, Khan and Delmonda are becoming closer. They've established this kind of dialogue between them. And there's this kind of more trust forming between them, or at least it seems that way. But Khan is still wanting to keep tabs on the Alborians. So he is having Ivan and others tracking them and keeping tabs on their movements. There's a little bit of I kind of wonder how much of that is Khan wanting to not make his people think that he's trusting them so much, but he actually is finding himself trusting them a lot. I was kind of curious about that interplay there. How much of that is keeping up appearances for his people a little bit?
Yeah, there's a lot of intricate dynamics that are taking place. I mean, Khan is sort of he's dipping his toe in the waters of diplomacy. And I mean, as someone who would have had to rule, the planet and stuff like that, planet Earth, obviously he would have had to have had a certain amount of that in him as well to be able to do that. But I think he was able to use the bargaining chip of his brutality, whereas that's no longer something that he's capable of doing. And again, a little interesting exchange that I appreciated there as well was when he offers Delmonda vodka. Yes. And Delmonda is like, oh, well, like, what's this for? And he's like, well, it lubricates social interaction and stuff like that. And he's like, well, it's like a blunt object, right? There are other ways, to use certain types of toxins or substances to lubricate social interaction. Alcohol is a real kind of like a blunt object. And it's funny that Ivan's the guy making it, the blunt object of the group. And you see a lot again, how Delmonda sees right through where Khan is coming from in a lot of ways. I also like that he eats the bones as well. He just crunches on them. That was a really gross.
You're meant to eat around the bones. It's like, the bone calcium's great. Oh, okay.
Yeah, great. I was eating carrot cake at the time, and when I first heard that, I could feel it in my teeth, and so I had to stop chewing for a minute.
Yeah, another thing in this exchange that I appreciated too was something we touched on in the last episode a little bit, is the not understanding where the other is coming from, where Khan says basically like, why are you doing this? Why aren't you just, taking what you want? And he said, well, why would we do that? And Khan says, well, if I had your numbers and your technology, like, I would have killed all of us. Like, basically saying that if the roles were reversed, I would absolutely have killed all of you. After Del Monte had said, like, well, wouldn't you have done the same? And Khan's like, absolutely not. I would have murdered every last one of you. And he says it as though just like, yeah, that's a given. And so that clash of cultures is interesting for sure.
It is actually reminiscent. I'm doing a lot of research on the Crusades, and how the two armies, the European Crusaders meeting the West Asian armies, and how they interacted when the Omar Obeid, I believe was his name, took Jerusalem back from the Crusaders. They came across a cardinal who was hanging out in Jerusalem. And this cardinal is decked out in all these fine garments and robe, diamonds and jewels and everything. And at first he thought the man riding the camel was the caliph, the head of this Muslim army. And it turned out that the guy leading the camel was actually that caliph, and he was in tattered clothing. And he's like, well, why are you dressed this way? He's like, well, I'm at war. Like, why would I do that? And then later he's like, well, are you going to like pillage and plunder Jerusalem? He's like, why? He's like, we're not going to be able to like collect taxes and establish anything if we kill everybody. We need these people here, and we need them on our side. And he's like, so, you're representing the Christians. He's like, where's the Jews? And the Crusader cardinal's like, oh, we killed them all. And Omar Obeid's like, what? You killed them all? He's like, well, yeah, we murdered every single one of them. And immediately Omar Obeid sent out for other Jewish people to come to Jerusalem and reestablish a Jewish community in Jerusalem right there. And the cardinal's just like eyes like dinner plates. He's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, we need balance. And he's like, I don't understand any of this. He's like, well, no, clearly not. All you know is fighting and death. And so I think that's interesting because we have that again. All Khan knows is destroy. All Khan knows is might makes right. Power and destruction is how he thrives. And it's a very scary programming to have. And it's unfortunately a very scary programming that I think people in our current world seem to only understand too.
It's very stark when it's shown in a conversation like this. And I feel like, I don't know, I wish the ideas behind our society and the way people think were laid a little bit more bare like that to kind of understand what's going on. And because this is very well written here. There's a lot of allegories going on that like does the stuff that Star Trek should do, right? So
yeah, very much.
I'm loving this. So speaking of allegories and people representing forces in our society, Ivan, this is where I think, like, up to this point, obviously he's been incredibly aggressive, and obviously I think I put it in, the first couple episodes as like, he's the snake in the society here. This is where I think he commits the irredeemable sin, the transgression you cannot come back from, which is Ivan, as we said, has been keeping tabs on the Alborians. At one point, he comes across a lone Alborian by himself, and this Alborian tries to defend himself by getting into Ivan's mind, but Ivan resists and ultimately kills this Alborian. And it's brutal. They don't hold back. They don't hold back on what Ivan thinks and how he justifies what he's done and what he intends to do from that point forward. And you don't hear a lot from the other Alborian, but you hear the terror and the helplessness from the sounds, I'm thinking he's choked to death by Ivan. And it's brutal. It's really brutal. And
it's straight up cold-blooded murder.
100%. And I don't think Ivan, in my mind anyway, maybe in this society he's a part of, he comes back from. But in my mind, as far as a listener to this, he does not come back from.
Yeah, no, he's the monstrousness. It actually, what went through my mind was actually, if anyone's ever seen the extremely difficult to watch movie American History X, there's a part where Edward Norton's character, who's a neo-Nazi, curb stomps someone, and his last words to him is, "Now say goodnight," and he curb stomps him. And it's a visceral scene. And I felt, from what I think the doctor says later, the boot mark in the back of
In the shape of the
head.
boot print in his skull. Yeah.
Yeah. It really kind of just gave me American History X vibes of just this lack of humanity that comes out of Ivan is plain for everyone to see. And you're right. It's a moment of irredeemability. It's a moment of, I don't even know. The words aren't coming. Other than yeah, no. You and I have disliked this character from the start. He's really gotten under my skin in a lot of cases, and at this point, I am happy to see him suffer and die. To be honest, I don't want this character around anymore. But I think he has to be here to really show us the reason why history sees Khan as a monster, because I think we've mentioned this before. It's not we get stuck in these great man of history things, and I think Khan is a lot more of a complicated character, right? Obviously, and he's a complicated person in history. But there are some people who are pretty uncomplicated, and Ivan is one of them. He's a sociopath. He's a complete and total monster who is ready to kill at a whim, and yeah, that when he murders. When he commits this level of cold-blooded murder, and he takes joy in it. It's gross, but I'm glad he gets apprehended pretty fast.
Yeah. So meanwhile, while this is happening, the Khan and his people are kind of exploring these underground areas where this underground lake is, and all of that. At one point, Khan hears something going on with his people, so he leaves Marla to go look after them and trusts that she can find her way out. Turns out that she was not able to do that. She got a little bit lost. But it's in this moment when they're separated and she's by herself that Delmonda reaches out to Marla and talks to her and gets her to come to where Ivan is, where this has all happened. I found this really interesting. Delmonda, in talking to Marla, says, "You're different from all the rest. There's something different about you, and I feel like I can reach you and talk to you." So this distrust that Khan has had of Delmonda, we find out has been mirrored by Delmonda, and he recognizes that there's something very not right about Khan and his group. But Marla is separate from that, which is interesting because you mentioned in the last episode as well, or in the previous part of this episode, that there might be kind of a schism between Marla and Khan and his followers at some point. We've seen them come together. Perhaps we're going to see them come apart again at some point. I found that fascinating, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about what Delmonda sees as the fundamental difference between Marla and Khan and his followers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fundamental difference is again, it comes down to programming. It comes down to worldview, those kinds of things. And yeah, I think the unfortunate piece of this is, if you've got this group of people who, for the most part, only believe in might, only believe in power, only believe in violence to get what you're looking for, someone like Marla is going to get in the way, despite the fact that she is now carrying her and Khan's child. And for Delmonda to recognize that, I think, again, this is going to draw a line, I think, between Marla and Lear as well. And I think there's a programming, but there's also an ability to see past one's programming. And I think Lear and Marla both have shown a propensity to be able to kind of see a bigger picture, to see something with a little more nuance. And I think they've paid certain prices for that, and I don't think Marla's done paying a price for being able to do that. But it's good that Delmonda can recognize that, because I think the other piece of that is I think the ability to see past that, to see more empathetically, to see the bigger picture, to understand and recognize nuance, and not see a world purely as a hammer would a bunch of nails. I think that is maybe the advancement that humanity is really trying to get to. That's the filter we need to pass through to be able to get to a better a better future. And I think Marla really does show that, and Delmonda recognizes that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, not only are they, is Marla a human being unaugmented, and the augments are different from her in that way, but there's also like 200 years of history difference between them as well, right? And
exactly.
if Star Trek is to be believed, a lot happened in those 200 years to kind of advance us in the way we think and the way we deal with the universe, right? So it's interesting, and I like that exploration there. But Marla, it's clear we kind of for the first time get her on her own and hear her feelings about Ivan, which I think are probably pretty obvious, but it's good to hear her say those things that like, oh, I'm shocked that you were able to even, I can't remember exactly what she says, but she feels she does not think highly of Ivan even before she learns that he has done this, right? So, but Khan has been made aware that the Elborians have Ivan, and eventually comes to join them as well, and discovers what has happened here. So, yeah, interesting fallout from that as well.
Yeah, and I think all of this is happening again around the idea that we're still losing members of Khan's party in the cave collapses that are starting to happen. Some of his more kind of staunch supporters, like the Doctor, are starting to lose a bit of hope, and feeling that kind of hopelessness. And again, I think we do see that here in our world right now, that there are some people who have, I actually have a very close friend. I won't name them, but they are very much convinced that humanity is doomed. We're all going to die. This is our extinction event. And it's just a matter of trying to live life as happily as you can until that happens, whether it happens in our lifetime or not. It's inevitable at this point. And I fundamentally disagree. But at the same time, I don't necessarily see that is totally illogical way of looking at things, given the situation we are beset with, and it's so much more intensified on Ceti Alpha V. And so I think we're going to see this start to really culminate in the coming episodes, especially given the revelations we've been given.
That reaction to losing the child, I think, was very stark and very realistic in my mind. And the part that I found the most interesting to me was she says all of these things to Khan, and Khan doesn't refute any of them. You can tell in his voice he's been chastened and he's thinking about things, and he just says, okay, well, the next thing I have to do is this. I will go here and do this, and kind of walks away. And I found that reaction really interesting. Like in episode 1, we would have gotten the bombastic speech that rallies all the people, and this one, like he's on his back feet a little bit as far as what's just been happening, right? So interesting. What happens next is the talking with the Elborians, and Delmonda reveals that they've been constructing this ship. But apparently not for the Elborians to escape Ceti Alpha V, but rather for Khan and his people. That is an interesting revelation, and I feel like it could be taken two different ways, because like it could be a selfless act, but it could also be a threat, almost. I don't know.
I liked this twist at the end here, and it's left a lot of loose ends hanging, because now that we know what we know at the end here, apparently people are going to get off Ceti Alpha V before the cataclysm.
Yeah.
But who? And how many? And what?
Exactly. Yeah, because, so the ultimate revelation back on the Excelsior at the end, of course, we find out, Tuvok gives a little quid pro quo to Lear, right? It says, like, I want to know who your benefactor was, who gave you these initial logs that you got. And apparently it was Delmonda. So at some point, presumably Delmonda got off Ceti Alpha V. With whom, though, is a good question.
all in all, I think we have this is the episode where I think we're going to start seeing the convergence of everything. Now I think everything's going to move pretty fast I know they've had to like jump some weeks and some months in the last few episodes, kind of setting the stage here. But as we are past the halfway point, I think we're going to see things kind of tumble together pretty starkly moving forward. And I think all of these questions and philosophical thoughts that we currently sit in, I think what we're going to notice with the story is how quickly things can change and how quickly things can move. And again, if there's anything that I could say about that in our world, it would be the same thing. Sometimes it can feel like, decades pass and nothing happens. And then sometimes a year can pass and it feels like decades go by. Right. And I think since about 2020, we've really felt that. But I don't think we've seen anything yet, good or bad, and hopefully more good. But in that time, when things fall apart, they really fall apart. And the planet being affected by this change in gravity, causing earthquakes, making weather patterns shift and change, and all these sorts of things. I mean, we are seeing that right now as well. And so I think, being that we are a positive duo, and I think most of our listeners are positive, we can take tragedy stories like these and really reflect on what it is we can do to ensure that the worst doesn't happen fast. Or if bad things do happen, we can mitigate them in ways. And look for the helpers, as Mr. Rogers would say. And I think Delmonda and his little group of Alborians could potentially be helpers here. I don't see the threat, but I could see Khan seeing it as a threat.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really curious to see where this story goes. It's in these 2 episodes really taken turns that I was not expecting. No. And it's really made me excited for what these last 3 episodes are going to bring us. As you say, I think there's going to be a convergence of the modern story, aboard the Excelsior, as well as what's going on with Khan and his people. And I think I wasn't anticipating that story having as big an impact on what's happening on the Excelsior and all of that as I think it's going to have. So very excited about that. But in 2 weeks' time, we will be doing an episode on the next 2 episodes, episodes 7 and 8. So please join us then. And until then, as always, stay positive. Positively Trek is produced and edited by me, Dan Gunther, and co-produced by Barry DeFord on Treaty 8 territory, the home of the Beaver, Cree, Dene, and Métis people, whose histories, languages, and cultures we respect. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations.